This is Aaron Simmons, again, professor of philosophy here at Furman, and I am back with you talking to another of our distinguished alums coming out of the philosophy department. Tonight, I get the pleasure of talking to a student that was one of my students and one of my favorite human beings on this earth, Peter Dimery, who you graduated, what, 2016, 17? When did you graduate?
2015.
15. All right. So you graduated 2015, was a music philosophy double major, and excited to hear about what he's been up to since graduation. So yeah, let's just dive in, man. Peter, talk to us a little bit about what you've done since graduation, what you're doing now, and then we'll maybe dive in a little bit into your favorite experiences at Furman and some advice that you might have for current students.
Yeah, for sure. So I always tell people I have two jobs, or rather, I should say, philosophy has three roles in my life. Two of them are job related, and one is life existentially related. So I'm a marketing professional, and I work on the operation side of things, and so mostly business strategy, budgeting, that sort of thing. And in that, I'm always in meetings, and I'm mediating. I'm always thinking critically. I'm always looking at the big picture. And so lots of the rigor of just understanding systemic philosophy really pays off when you're in those situations, because not only do you have, what you're personally contributing, you're really seeing from various perspectives, you're able to reconcile them and make some sort of prescriptive suggestion that can take things forward. And so that's actually a very marketable skill, whether you're in marketing, finance, whatever it may be in the corporate sphere. Like, just the ability to digest and understand complex philosophy pays dividends in those strategic situations. So that's the corporate side of things. And I'm also a professional musician. I do a lot of things, but I tell people most of the time jazz and funk and fusion are my wheelhouses. I play electric bass and saxophone. Saxophone is my primary instrument, but whatever people hire me for, I'll play, because music is music. There was something I saw recently, I think it was Kenny Barron, great jazz pianist, said, what does genre matter? There are only 12 notes. So you have to have something far beyond that too. So, but of course, as being a musician, and this is tied into what we'll probably talk about, in my Furman experience, I think aesthetics is very important, because why you play music or make whatever art you make, makes an incredible difference in understanding your experience and how it plays into the things that have influenced you and how you execute your art. I mean, those are incredibly valuable things to really dive into, and it's such rich material to take you through your artistic career. So I think it's very important to just understand, why it is what you do, because it's such a commitment. It's a personal commitment, it's professional commitment, it's a commitment to others. So just understanding what motivates you and what keeps you in that sphere and motivated, I think is very important to understand. Philosophy definitely lends itself to that. And also the life portion of philosophy that I mentioned, whether you are religious or not, I think existentialism and understanding phenomenology is very important to deepening your relationship to experience and being able to fully integrate it into how you live. So I think it's deeply important in how I understand who I am, how I relate to people, what I bring to the table in terms of, how I'm living my life and how I'm, in service to my passions and the imagination. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a cool answer. So, just to kind of summarize for people hopping in, you're doing marketing, working for a corporation, 9 to 5 kind of stuff, life full of meetings. But then you're also playing music professionally, evenings, weekends, traveling back and forth to New York in a bunch of different bands, playing for whoever will put that paycheck on the music stand. And whatever though you're doing, philosophy is then showing up as anchoring you in, values that matter and virtues we're striving for and meaning and purpose in life, regardless of our job. So I think that's a really cool way to frame it. Well, let's get into the weeds a little bit on kind of just the career stuff, and then we'll back into some more fun things. So professional musician, let's start there. This seems like a career route that is fraught with misunderstanding. As you know, and students may not know, I used to be a professional musician, played drums, was a session player for a lot of years while in grad school. And it's one of those things where like the union card, right, is just be good. The problem is everybody's good. Like,
Right.
if you're gonna play in that space, everybody's good. So what is it that you have found to kind of allow finding some traction, being able to turn this into, if not your full-time job, at least a really good, side hustle that then may eventually turn into something more full-time moving forward? How is it that you go from just being good at an instrument to being a professional musician? What's your experience in that?
So this actually, I'm going to reference a conversation that we've had about the difference between excellence and competition, and and so I think really it's like, and, and not to get into deeply how they're different, but just to kind of reference parts of that. So I'll give specific examples. So I live in Greenville. I live in Greenville, South Carolina, and I've lived here for pretty much almost 10 years, and I've had a professional career here, and I travel, like you were saying earlier, I travel wherever. But I think the thing is, and a lot of the time I'm a side man. That's to say, I'm a freelancer, and folks are contacting me for various projects, and so there's not necessarily a core group that I'm always playing with, but it's very the transitory nature of freelance, but I think the thing is the willingness to be DIY and to say, okay, like, living in the Southeast, a lot of people know the major music markets, so to speak, are, if we're talking Southeast, we're talking Atlanta and Nashville and Miami, things like that. We're mostly talking New York and LA and places like that. And so if you're in South Carolina, instead of saying like, oh man, I'm here, or I'm here, or it's like, what opportunity is there that I can capitalize on? How can I deepen relationships? And so in that way, I'm like, okay, it's more than just being good. Yes, it's about being good from a personal standard perspective. So there's the excellence part, so to speak. And you have to really be hip to the competition part, because to your point, yeah, there's so many great musicians. So what's really going to set you apart? So are you easy to work with? Are you personable? Are you really paying attention to, are you being present with the people you're being present with? And are you secure in what it is you're presenting to people? Do you believe in the things that you're presenting to people? So really being connected to your purpose, because there are lots of people that, really at the end of the day, and this may sound crazy, like talent doesn't matter. It really, when it really comes down to it, it's like, do you believe in what you're doing? Are you confident? Are you able to communicate that to people? Are you able? So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that really makes the difference when you're being a professional, because you can be good at your instrument in your bedroom and you can
Yeah.
never present it to anyone. There are like, I don't know, there are folks in their bedrooms who are probably way better at my
Mm-hmm.
instruments than I am, and they're content with that. And the difference is the belief or the courage or whatever it may be of, I am going to put this thing then out there, and I'm going to stand by it and just show up and be present.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, a couple of things you said really resonate with me, and what I try to invite people into as a professor. One, like, are you easy to work with? That's effectively another way of saying, are you able to navigate the world according to some power structure that you may not yet be able to control?
Mhm.
Right? Like,
Mhm.
we can read Foucault, we can talk about Nietzsche's Killing God and all kinds of stuff about the problems with capitalism and the issues with our social justice structures and all these problems, and we should. But then it's also important to understand, yeah, but look, like you can rage against capitalism, but how are you going to convince those bankers to pay attention? Right. And, being able to realize being easy to work with doesn't just mean being a doormat. It means being able to understand how to negotiate the norms, the expectations, and the structures that pre-exist you. Right. And excuse me, I think that this connects into the second thing you're saying, which is, how do you get your stuff out there, right? How do you present yourself? And this is something I keep trying to tell a lot of students, from freshman writing seminars all the way up to graduating seniors working on a senior thesis. The first thing we've got to do in whatever we choose to do with our lives is find our voice. Right. And this is a long-term project. Heidegger and Kierkegaard both understand, like, selfhood is a task for a lifetime. It's not something that, like, ooh, I found my voice, I'm good now, right? Any more than, oh, I'm great at the sax, guess I don't have to practice. It's like, no, the better I am, the more I understand the importance of practicing. But finding our voice, this is why, like, presentations in class, you may think, what relevant this is to anything in the world. Well, it's finding your voice. Even if you never give a presentation on philosophy again, can you present yourself as someone people should listen to, right? And can you do that with the requisite humility to understand, I've got to be able to speak into a structure that I did not determine and make a mark on that structure so that maybe it looks different after I've participated in it. And I think you're exactly right to say, for musicians, my goodness, it is really hard to sustain ego as a musician, because the only way to pull that off is not to hang out with musicians.
Absolutely.
Right? You hang out with musicians, like, somebody's gonna be better than you real fast. And so being able to be comfortable in your own skin to say, hey, just like in the classroom, it's not about getting the A in the class. It's, am I in fact confident enough to bring what I got, to be able to present what I'm doing here, to find my voice, to speak up, to raise my hand, to be compelling, and do this in a way that then says, I'd rather be excellent than just be perceived as good. Right. And I think
phenomenologically, how does that look, living that out every single day?
How do we live this out?
What is the process behind it?
That's exactly right. Now, how do you reconcile, maybe is the best word, this kind of jazz creativity that you get to embody as a musician with the, for lack of a better term, three-piece suit of the corporate world that you also occupy? Like, you and I've talked, of course, about how these kind of fit together well for you, but I'm sure people would love to hear, your dreams to play music, and you're playing music, but you're also having to do something to pay rent, right? Like,
for sure.
It's okay to be an adult, recognizing that there can be kind of two sides to how I spend my time, and my career can be multifaceted. So how is it that you reconcile these two sides that seem so very much at odds with each other?
Right. I'll give a bit of a chronology of it. So when I graduated in 2015, I actually quit for a year, which we've talked about. But when I came back to things, I very much was like, I'm taking any and every gig that's presenting itself, because at that time I was very much like, I'm here to play. That is what I'm here to do. I won't say I didn't have a career direction, but really it was like, I'm playing and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to get that experience or those experiences, and then see how that looks. And so I would say up until, before 2020, I'd say 2019 really was when I was kind of reassessing, and I was like, I'm playing like full time. I'm on the road constantly. I'm putting 30,000 miles a year on my car, and I'm really like, I'm traveling. And so I really assessed it, and I was like, all right, so I'm listening to things, I'm assessing where I am, and it's like I can keep going the direction I'm going, or I can kind of take some risks and say I want to do this, this, and that. And so then here enters like what people would call a day job, and it's like, okay, on the scale of things, I can say if I took less of these gigs that I'm just to be really frank, begrudgingly doing, if I just don't do those and say I'm going to take at that time, chronologically from 2015 to about 2019, let me take a part-time job or something where, and then when you take a part-time job, it's like, all right, what can I do in this job to maximize things that could help me? And in my experience, that has been listening to music, because again, music has large, especially in the American and in jazz and improvisational tradition, has been oral or aural experiences. And so, what better way to spend a 9 to 5 than being able to listen to music? And in fact, like I've had very like smart bosses who realize like this person's going to be my most valuable asset from a productivity perspective. If I just let him listen to music all day, what a small thing to concede to get, at the end of the day, we talk about capitalism, maximum productivity. What a small thing to concede to get maximum productivity and loyalty from someone, some a convenience like that, that it's like, okay, now I'm going to go play my gig tonight and I know this music. I memorized it. I'm really, so that's one large way, is just figuring out like, what, you don't always have to have your saxophone or whatever your instrument is to practice being a musician. You have to figure out, what other elements there are that you can maximize. I think that has a lot to do with the commitment, because it's like I could say, oh no, I don't have the time to practice or do this or that, but it's like I could flip it and say, what things can I do that will really help me in the long haul? um and then post 2020, really being remote is a massive help. So again, in accommodating, it's like if I have to go somewhere for some period of time, if I'm working, I can work during the day, and then I can play in Nashville 5 nights a week or in New York 5 nights a week. And so I think that also has a lot to do with the economy transforming. COVID being the destruction that it was societally, had some significant changes structurally in music that I think a lot of people have been able to take advantage of. And because of remote work, I will say that lots more musicians have been able to say, I will take less of these gigs that I may be just doing to put food on the table, and I can do this. And then the other thing is marketing. What a great, I mean, marketing and finance, because I've had some experience in corporate finance too. What great things to do in corporate America that have paid dividends in being a person who has your own business. Like being an artist is being a business person. And so marketing, it's like understanding strategy, digital strategy, social media, outreach, very fundamental things that, Kierkegaard doesn't have a lot to say about marketing, but, but just things like that, I really do feel, contract negotiating terms, and, understanding your worth and how to, select an audience who is what you actually want, knowing how to strike the deals that are appropriate, knowing how to step away from the things that aren't appropriate. And so corporate America being business is business has actually had tremendous, positive impact on how I conduct myself as an
Mhm.
artist. And I feel like, I don't know, we've probably had semblances of this conversation before. I feel like as an artist, you can be led into like believing in these dreams that are really whimsical and far off, and seem like they're not palpable at all. And really, like, you can be very pragmatic approaching being an artist. It's like understanding, intellectual property, understanding, am I being fairly compensated? Am I being taken advantage of? Understanding from like, this is something I believe that would be Marxist in a way, like co-op ways of, the DIY scene in whatever genre you would imagine. That's a very co-op, spirited sort of effort. And so just understanding like, crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, other ways of socially engaging, and not just like the for profit necessarily, for equitable profit, we can say that,
Right.
so yeah.
So let me ask you to maybe dive a little bit deeper on one point you made, which is as a musician, you said you often had to take gigs that you were maybe begrudging or not exactly excited about.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that is probably true for most adults, regardless of career field, is that fact, right? Having to do some aspect of our job, or maybe even having to take a job that didn't exactly fill us with excitement or seem fulfilling relative to life purpose. And I think maybe one of the things that's sometimes dangerous about the way that universities in general, but Furman in particular, talks about college to career transitions, is we tend to talk about them as you're in college for 4 years, you graduate, you're doing great, and then within 6 months we want to have whatever it is, like we want to have 100% employed or in grad school.
Placement, yeah.
But we'll take 90 and brag about it, right? The problem is it's as if like the job of college is done once you sign that first contract to make a little bit of money 6 months out of out of college. But what you're saying is no, like I might have a job so I can pay my rent and eat and wear shoes, but I might be playing weddings, doing covers of Taylor Swift for the 9,000th time that I do not want to play. Right? There's only so many Shake It Off in 6/8 version. Like, nope, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And yet, you gotta, like, somewhere in us, virtue as adults is being able to recognize this isn't the rest of my life. It's okay if I have to keep working to get someplace. What I was doing in college doesn't end at graduation. It's something that cultivates now a lifetime of commitment to a particular notion of excellence and progress and development. So, how is it that you reconciled yourself to suck it up, take the gig, and still keep but I'm also wanting to be an artist and push forward and do more interesting
Mhm.
things? How does that tension play out for you?
Yeah, I'll actually give an example that it worked itself out, came full circle this past weekend. So this past weekend, I got to record with a producer who had worked with Return Forever and Phil Collins and Stanley Clark, and he's working for a singer songwriter. And they called me in. They only sent me one song, and it was to vibe check and to see, if it was, let him lay some takes down on a solo and see if it's kind of what we want to work with. And then we ended up laying down 5 tracks, and they were like, "Man, we love your playing," like so on and so on. And most of these things were like 16 bar phrases, 32 bar phrases. It's not like an extended, jazz solo, but it's like, and in all those takes, it's like you're saying all of them, they keep them all or whatever, but you're crafting something over time. And so all that to say, I go back to playing the Taylor Swift gigs and things like that. Well, when they call me to play a solo, I've got 16 bars, I've got 32 bars, it's the same format. And in that time that I was playing those gigs, I was like, all right, I'm going to try some material that I've been like working out or imagining or whatever in this time. And look, here it is. Now I'm playing for a producer, and it's like these 16 32 bar phrases. Or he would sing me like these like phrases, and then we would work something out, and I would go in and listen. He'd be like, okay, take 10 was the first half of this is great, and take 11, the second half was great. Go in the booth and recreate exactly what you just did. And because I had had that experience playing those gigs of only having 16 and 32 bar solos, it's like I've been preparing for this my entire career. No matter how boring or whatever you want to say, like it
Right.
it didn't matter. And so it's just understanding the perspective of like, repetition, I mean, Kierkegaard talks about repetition,
Yep.
a lot, but it's like, yeah, it's just understanding, like, if you're not doing what you're necessarily wanting to be doing right now, is like, what can you be working on in this
Yeah.
time that you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
And even on the corporate side, I'll say real quick, a job that I had at one point, just it was probably the shortest job I've ever had ever. And I was like at like a call center, and in between, I had a Wittgenstein book. I had like this book, Culture and Value, and I would just like, in between calls, I would just like highlight some things and read,
Mhm.
and and I was making the calls so fast that I was like, all right, I'll do like 5 calls in a row, and I'll take like 5 minutes, and I'll read like these sections and highlight them. Then when I get home, I can take the highlighted sections and I can write 500, 1,000, whatever it may be, and work some things out. And so it's just like, anywhere you are, just understanding that it's like, I can be wrapped up in whatever this is, or I can
Yeah.
understand like how to, flip this and take it to my advantage. If these situations are going to take advantage of you, you have to understand how you can get your own personal, things done in that time. So just use your imagination.
I love it. I think it's so powerful. And it is. It's stuff I don't think that a lot of students think about, right? They dream big, which is good, but sometimes the idea of dreaming big is a process of playing small for a long time to
Mhm.
then, pop. Like, I mean, my goodness, the number of stories of, the Dave Matthews bands of the world who were playing frat parties for 5, 6, 7 years before ever getting on a stage that then exposed them more broadly. And there's something powerful about philosophy that I think invites that kind of humility, right? That,
Mhm.
Aristotle says it's hard work to be spudaios, to be excellent. And so Socrates then realizes, so if we're committed to excellence, we've got to cultivate the humility that allows us to live a life devoted to it, right?
Mhm.
So let's back up then a little bit. We've talked about your career, kind of where you are, some of the ways philosophy's helped you in it. Um, Tell a little bit. I know it's a long and complicated and winding story. I used to call you Denise Huxtable because every week there was a new commitment. You have found your life's passion. But tell a little bit about kind of how you became a philosophy major and how that
Yeah.
emerged for you as somebody who went to college wanting to go to law school, but of course was on music scholarship. So that took all your time. And then philosophy kind of came out of left field and then really became the anchor for how you understood all these other things that were also important to you. So, how did that philosophy interest develop, in, specifically at Furman?
Yeah, for sure. So before I went to college, like, I'd always just played music. I didn't come from a musical family. Like, my family liked music. They listened to music a lot. So I was exposed to like great music. And so I was like, which I think is actually deeply important, to be like a listener and a patron of music, and to have that passion before you then go to the next step. But um through auditions and different things, like, I didn't take lessons and things like that, and so I didn't understand that I could do it professionally, and that I was able to. And so when when music scholarships entered the picture, I was like, you know, I come from a I come from a family where, like, both of my parents, they own their own businesses, and they also had corporate positions and so on and so forth. And so I never understood like that a degree was in any way connected to your, being able to just find a job and live a life and have an income. So my decision kind of split, second, was like, I don't think I'll ever have the chance to formally study music ever again. So if I have this opportunity, I'm just going to do that and be able to take advantage of some of those things. But when I got there, there were some of my peers who were like, I come from a musical family, and like this was always destined for me, and I have these expectations and this that, and I never had that pressure. And so there was a lot of just existential like pondering. It's like, what is my purpose for doing this? What do I want to do for with this? Because when I met you, I was mostly playing classical music. Like I was kind of playing some jazz and some other things, but I was deeply just connected to becoming a better saxophone player, which that's always an ongoing process. But like at that time, it was the core of it was developing technically as a player. And then I had to think to myself, I'm like, I'm spending at that time 7 8 hours a day playing my instruments. Like, where do I want to go with this? What do I want to turn this into? And so enter my having to satisfy a UQ credit for Furman. One of my great friends, Jody Lee, recommended, hey man, you should take philosophy. And so my only exposure to philosophy at that point in my life was the parable of the cave and Ayn Rand, if you consider that. Anyway, but so I took the class, and like, I mean, day two, I was just like, all these questions. First of all, just like, which this is particularly why I'm super interested in Wittgenstein and like philosophy of language, having the language to understand existentialism and phenomenology and those sorts of things that really put language to the experiences that I was having but could not quite articulate, and the questions deeply that I had that I couldn't articulate, and then understanding that I could also formulate the answer to those questions and that I had the power to, you know, direct that in any way. And so philosophy then became the core of like my aesthetics compass. It's like a core of taste and why I have certain tastes. Also, like, the way I write and what I write about and the things I believe. On the Marxist end of things, like how like being an artist relates, like how we have a responsibility to, in a way, be like, economists and understanding like, are we being taken care of? Are our communities being taken care of? That kind of thing, to have like a personal stake in what's going on. Um, and now at the time at Furman, to your point, I thought, when I found philosophy, oh yeah, philosophy is great for getting ready for the LSAT. I can, logic is great. And that is true. It is absolutely true. I mean, it's great. It's great, honestly, like we were talking about earlier. If you want to do any kind of like critical analysis in the corporate field, like really being into logic and analytic philosophy is absolutely perfect for being able to craft that sort of nuanced thinking. But yeah, philosophy just really helped me understand where I wanted to direct things. And once I decided ultimately I didn't want to go to law school and I just wanted to use it, for life music and wherever it could apply in the corporate world, you know, then I was deeply attached. I'm still attached very much to really Wittgenstein. If I have to
Mhm.
zero in on someone, at Furman, I love Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, and
Yeah.
those are really the bedrock, and Heidegger and Hegel, absolutely Hegel too. But if I really had to sum it up in recent years, I mean, lots of Wittgenstein, and I go back to Schopenhauer when I talk about
Mhm.
aesthetics a lot.
Mhm.
That period. There's a book, Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature, and
Yeah. Richard
I use
Rorty.
that. Yeah, I use that a lot in just understanding, like, when we talk about like music in the academy, there are lots of like Kantian ways of understanding
Mhm.
things, like it from metaphysics of moral perspective, from aesthetics, from things like that. And I think Rorty unpacks a lot of that in
Yeah.
that book that you can use kind of in opposition to those sorts of things if you're thinking from a pedagogical perspective. And I mean, philosophy has also had, like, speaking of pedagogy, it's had quite an impact on how I relate to students, and how
Mm.
instead of being immediately prescriptive, it's like, why are you interested in what you're interested in? How are you trying
Yeah.
to hear things? Where are
Yeah.
you coming from with this? And then understanding how to grow and prescribe, but really like have a conversation about these things, and understand, perspective in that sense.
So, well, and I'm thrilled that you got into philosophy. I know Dr. Worth and I both worked a lot with you and benefited a ton from it. I will say Peter was to the students watching, one of my favorite memories was in a class. I forget if it was the hip hop class you took with me or if it was just intro or what, but I assigned, they had to write a track. And so Peter not only like laid down lyrics to this track and stuff, but also like showed up and played live sax with this backing track in the classroom. I mean, so yeah, man, I miss you in my classes because you brought that like artistic flavor that just elevated the game, and it was super cool. So what is it that you regret about your college experience, that if you, knowing what you know about your career, where you are now, what is something that you might have done differently or you wish you had known, or something that you would love to go back and like, smack yourself at 18 and say, hey, don't forget to do this thing? What's that thing that you wish you had done maybe differently?
I think you'll laugh at this. I actually don't regret anything, and that's because, so remember our conversation, and a conversation I also had with Dr. Worth about declaring philosophy and also keeping the music major. And it was like, okay,
Yeah.
you could declare it and make your life significantly more difficult, or you could just take a couple classes and see how you like it and that kind of thing. And I was like, no, I'm throwing myself full into this. I'm going to make it difficult. And I did. It was extremely
Yeah.
difficult. It was crazy. But if I had not done that, both of them, I would have regretted that, because I
That's
did get
interesting.
a ton out of both of them.
Love it.
But so yeah, in that way, I don't have regrets, because at the same time, like I think, and the, I acknowledge that this is a privileged statement, because I was able to, college was a given for me. I was like, well, I'm
Right.
going to go to college. I'm going to major in something, and it wasn't ultra important what it was I majored in, as
Yeah.
long as I had passion and drive
Mm-hmm.
in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, the ability to just have both of those experiences and be able to marry those things, I mean, that really just made the
That's
entire
awesome.
thing. But I think you're supposed to go to college and discover that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're supposed to give yourself room to say, like, I have some things that I have ideas about,
Mm-hmm.
because before we met, my freshman year, second semester, it was one in my writing seminar classes. It was a class that I can't remember the title of it, but it was basically a rhetoric class,
Right.
and I loved it. And I was like, man, that was the early inklings of like, I think I want to add like a humanities to this music experience, because I've got
Mm-hmm.
some things that I want to say and some ideas that I really want to express that I think also tie in, but I want to take advantage of this experience to say, like, like I want no holds barred. Tell me how to improve my writing and my thinking, and let's really
Yeah.
engage. That's something that I really appreciated, about the philosophy department, is just like, you guys told me exactly what it was. You got down to the core of it, and it's like, here's what I see what you're trying to say. Here is what you need to really strengthen that, or here are some things that you can really do. Yeah, and so yeah, that's to say, I don't think I regret anything about the college experience, because
I think that's a great answer. I mean, it's Seneca, live life without regrets. So that way, when we get to the end of our life, we don't look back and feel like we missed something, but we did the best we could along the way. And for what it's worth, to the people listening, like, yeah, we tried our best to talk you out of double majoring, because it came at some cost and there was financial implications and all kinds of stuff.
sure.
And yeah, I mean, you were like, nah, I'm in, like, and of course we were stoked to, run with you. But that's costly. I mean, there's another student who graduated more recently, who actually was one of the med school prepay students. So basically, like graduating from Furman, he was already, had med school more or less guaranteed and paid for. Like, it was this unbelievable thing. And dude took some philosophy courses, and he was like, yeah, I don't want to be a physician, and I want to major in philosophy, and I want to go into this other thing, and ended up wanting to go to divinity school and stuff. And he was my advisee, and I tried hard to talk that guy out of it. I was like, not because he should listen to me about what to do with his life, but just, man, like, understand the consequences of this decision that might to you seem passionate, it might end up seeming impulsive 5 years from now, right? Like
Right.
let's not miss this amazing opportunity that we've already got in place. Like, is there a way to keep it in, And he was like, nah, man, like I'm done. I'm not gonna be a physician. And he walked away from basically guaranteed acceptance and funded med school, and is now, doing great. He's up at Duke studying divinity and religion. And there are costs to decisions, but I love that you say, yeah, no regrets. I freaking lived it the best I could while I was there. I think it's awesome. So as we kind of bring our time together to a close, I want to know, what are some of the memories of philosophy department, philosophy classes, philosophy club, philosophy students, anything that really pops to you? One or two of these, like, yeah, you know what, like that stays in my head, that I remember. That was something that was fun, may have nothing to do with career, nothing to do with anything other than just, man, like that's something that says what mattered to me at that point in my life, and that really pops. What's an example of a couple of those things?
There are two things that are tied, and they are ways that I live my life on a regular basis. The first thing is long format discussion based class. And so I'm thinking like 19th, I'm thinking metaphysics with Dr. Baba. Um, and just like once a week, really like digging in, like really having time to like be vulnerable, really bring these ideas, like really talk about these things. I think that's important because philosophy takes time, and an hour goes by. I mean, we're proving it right now. An hour goes by really fast. And so just really having that time to like work these ideas out, and it wasn't just you guys lecturing. It was really like, this is difficult material, let's really work through it, and what are your ideas, and let's talk about them, and like how you got there, their implications, how you can take our discussion and then transform, so on and so forth. And so I think just those formats of classes for really difficult material, I think it's paid dividends. It's how I prefer to discuss things with, like, when I'm talking to artists and we're planning things, I'm like, let's just really set aside, carve out 3 or 5 hours and really just be present and really like be here. And there's an intimacy to that I think pays off. It also pays off in the corporate world. The second thing, very specifically, Dr. Wirth's aesthetics class. There were like pretty much like reading logs that we were doing, and they were so important to me from an organizational perspective, because when you're reading complex material, it's easy to get overwhelmed in the nuance. But it's like, what are main takeaways? Are you keeping the big picture? How are we applying? Because to me, this is a part of a later conversation I'm sure we'll have. I think aesthetics as an artist is pragmatic. You have to be able to like understand, like, sure, there are lots of components to me as a musician, as an artist. What are my mainstays? How am I understanding this on a broad level, and how can I communicate that? So just being able to read this material talking about, art criticism, music criticism, these things like that, and it's like, well, what do I think about this? Is all about taste and like understanding taste and being able to succinctly articulate these things and be able to organize and outline them. And I mean, that is another thing that pays dividends, and to me, I think is very pragmatic. So those were
awesome.
And if I can throw in an honorary third thing, just showing up to the philosophy department and being able to have conversations with anyone, anytime, having an impromptu 1 or 2 hour conversation about something that can really shed light on something you're either working on in class or something you're just reading in your spare time.
Yeah, I would say you were a trip, because you would show up to my office, daily, and knock on the door. Hey, Simmons, you got a minute? And you busy? And it was always so funny. You come in, it's like, of course, man, hop in. What's on your head? And you'd come in, sit down, and you'd never say, look, I'm struggling with this line in Kierkegaard. Can you make sense of it? It was always, so I think I want to be a professional chef. Or, I've decided I want to be a motorcycle mechanic. I mean, it was just absolutely like out of left field. I think I'm going to change everything in my life and go with all I've got this direction. And so all of our conversations that were impromptu, spontaneous, just, hey, you got a minute, ended up being these very lengthy, unpacked attempts to kind of say, hey, man, like, you're probably good where you are. Why don't we just finish? Why don't we just finish that, algebra class? We may not need to jump over here yet,
Yeah.
So it was, and I loved it, man. More than almost any student I've ever had, you lived on purpose into what I would describe, following somebody like Jacques Derrida. You lived on purpose into the play that should be activated in decisions that are serious, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we do with our life's a big deal. And yet it also, there's some play here. Like this is at some level, don't take yourself seriously though, because if you do, like, you're cruising for an egoistic nightmare,
Absolutely.
And I think you did that really well. So here's what I want people to take away from our conversation. It's important while you are at Furman to find your voice, grow in confidence as you deepen in humility. Remember that creativity is something that will drive you regardless of working in music or the professional space or whatever. And don't miss out during your 4 years at Furman. Don't miss out on the possibilities of radically interrogating your expectations of what you thought your life should look like, right? And I think you've modeled how to do all those things in the right ways. It's an honor still to know you, to hang out. For people watching, Peter and I get together, probably every couple months or so, we'll get together, have lunch, have coffee. And, half the time we're talking about music or, some new cat that you've just discovered. You're like, oh man, you got to check out the drum line on this new thing. Or I'm hitting you up saying, dude, have you heard this new hip hop album? It's got a sax that's just, fire. And it's been cool getting to now become friends as, former professor and student, now just two humans doing the best we can to navigate the world. And it's an honor to know you. It's an honor to still be close enough to consider you a neighbor. And, man, I'm glad you're an alum of our department. I'm glad you're doing amazing stuff. And if anybody has listened to Peter, it resonates with where you are, with the stuff you're dealing with, maybe you're interested in going into marketing or into music, please reach out to me and I can put you in touch with Peter. I'm sure he would be thrilled to meet with you. He is here in Greenville, at least for now. We're recording this as of April 2023. And so, maybe you can meet with him also and get some advice, some encouragement. And that's the point of these videos, is try to connect our alums with our current students to, learn from their wisdom, their mistakes, and maybe apply some of what they have to say into our own lives. So Peter, man, keep rocking. You are an inspiration to me, and I know you're going to be to a lot of our students. And so, dude, it's been an honor. Thank you again for your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you, man. It was a blast as always.
I appreciate it. To everybody else, we're going to keep dropping some of these interviews with alums, part of the Pathways program in the philosophy department, integrating these career competencies into our major, into our curriculum, and then trying to also invite you to make connections and get hooked up with people who are doing amazing things, living their philosophy degree in all sorts of ways. Because remember, philosophy is not training you to do a particular thing. It's training you to do better whatever you think's worth doing. So we'll see you next time. And so reach out if we want to get in touch with Peter. Talk to you soon.